Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about bridging the gap between sports movements and the weight room. An often talked about topic, but sometimes misunderstood. So when we're talking about bridging the gap between sport movements and weight room movements, we're talking about hitting, pitching, running, and sport, and we're talking about squats, presses, deadlifts in the weight room. So how can we bridge the gap between those two, and how can we get more specific, and how can we decide what movement to choose? Every sports skill displays their own level of strength and force expression is the first thing we have to understand. Hitting and pitching are completely independent skills, and they change in a way based off of what we're training. So, for example, running at top velocity is reactive strength, has a high peak force, a fast time, a low amount of total force, and a high rate of force development. So hitting, an independent skill of hitting. It is more of a maximal dynamic strength and reactive strength skill. It has moderate peak force to low peak force. It has a super fast time and a low amount of total force, but a high rate of force development. So how do we get specific in the weight room to match these skills? Each of these skills are independent within themselves, so we have to tailor a certain exercise to get specific to it. So what we can do is we can manipulate some of these elements right here to get specific to the sporting skill. Now, we don't have to manipulate all these elements. Just a few and we can get specific enough. So in my opinion, we have range of motion, rate of acceleration, rate of force development, physiological, so that would be muscles used, impulse, time, total and peak force, ground reaction force versus muscular force, rate of torque, line of force, ballistic versus non-ballistic, region of force attenuation / development, so that would be like where's the force being accumulated at and relative to the range of motion, and then region of peak force and time to peak force. So all these elements can be manipulated to get a little bit more specific to the sporting skill. So we take, for example, right here, the squat. All right, the squat is a very basic skill in the weight room. All right, it's flexion of the hips, knees, and ankles, extension of the hips, knees, and ankles. So the regular barbell squat in terms of acceleration when running has the same line of force, vertical relative to the athlete, and also physiologically uses some of the same muscle groups. So with the basic squat, we get two elements of specificity right off the bat to acceleration. Now, what we can do is we can manipulate more of these elements to get more specific to acceleration. So we take a partial squat, for example. So where we're getting to 100, 110 degrees of knee flexion. Now we're getting some more specificity elements towards acceleration. So now we have ballistic. Now the partial squat becomes ballistic, just like acceleration. Now our region of force attenuation / development is very similar in the partial squat and acceleration. Now our rate of force development has increased a lot and gets a little bit more specific to acceleration. And now our range of motion too of the limbs gets a little bit more specific to acceleration. And there's much more things I could go into, but you kind of see the deal here. Just by simply manipulating the range of motion in a squat, I obtain many more elements of specificity to acceleration. So you can see how we can manipulate some of these abilities within a basic movement to get more specific. Now we come into the time of what primary movement do I choose? How do I know whether it's squat, deadlift, RDL, split squat as a primary movement? What matters when selecting a primary movement? So we go over here, and the main things that matter is season. So what time of the year is it? When is their season? Impulse manipulability. Can you manipulate the impulse of that movement, or is it pretty strict? Variability. Does the movement have many different positions you can get into? Is there many different ways you can perform the movement? And then also personal objectives. So let's take the squat again, for example. If we choose a primary movement such as a barbell squat, we can manipulate the impulse of that barbell squat a lot. There's a lot of different ways we can manipulate the impulse, whether it's with chains, partial range of motion, pause at the bottom. We can keep on going forever. But the squat does not have a lot of variability. It's straight up, straight down, extension of the hips, knees, and ankles. Not much variability in the movement that we can do there. But in the end, impulse manipulability and season are king to deciding a primary exercise. Those are the two that matter most. And by no means do you have to check all these boxes, all right? It's not about checking the boxes, it's about the context behind what you're choosing and who you're choosing it for. So in the end, we remember that the body doesn't know positions. It doesn't remember positions. The body remembers expressions. So in the end, when you're looking at a weight room exercise or a sporting skill, think about how force is being expressed, not about the positions they're getting into.